Hi guys, welcome to this video, and today we're talking about chapter 8, strings in Python. Let's get started with strings.
Right. So now I'm sure all of you have now at this point have a basic idea of how Python works, and we're going to be in depth discussing how strings work in Python. So before we get into that, let's just discuss what a string actually is. String is nothing but a collection of Unicode characters. Now Unicode, as you guys know, is just all the numbers. I mean letters, numbers, characters, whatever. So like some idea of this. So I'm just gonna give an example. So let's say x equals to a, b, c, d. Now in Python you generally denote strings with double quotes or single quotes. I can write it like this, I can write it like this. It's more or less the same. The point here is that strings work in a manner that the characters inside them must be Unicode characters. I can put numbers, I can put special characters, I can put whatever I want, and it's just the same thing. Okay.
Yeah.
So now since you guys know strings, you guys know you can print them. Like I can print x and print y. And remember, when you write x and y, they're the variables, so you don't have to put quotes around them, and they're just gonna print the way I put them inside the quotes.
Yeah.
So that's about what strings are. Let's start with accessing characters in a string.
Yeah, so accessing characters is string. So let's say we have a string. String is equal to hello. What we're going to do here is each character in the string has an index, right? So what does that signify? The index is basically the position of the character in the string. So index starts from 0 from the left hand side and -1 from the right hand side, right? So H is 0, E is 1, L is 2, the second L is 3, and the O is 4, right? And if you go backwards, the O is -1, L is -2, L is, and then the second L is -3, E is -4, and H is -5. So as you can see, Arjun is showing you the positions above.
So -1, -2, I'm just going to space it out. Okay. So, okay, it's not actually fitting in, but yeah.
Yeah, so you get a general idea of what it actually is.
Yeah.
The spacing, So now that we know what indexing is, let's try to actually use indexing. So if you look on the right hand side of our screen here, I'm going to be running in the console. So let me define string is equal to Q programming, right? Now the program has stored the string variable with the value of Q programming, right? Let me say I want to access print string. Let me say I want to print the third element, which is Q, right? So I go 0, 1, 2. So 2, and then when I enter, it'll print P, right? So you see what I did there? Now let's say I want to print the third character from the end, right? So I go -1, G, -2, N, and then -3, I. So I go string, square bracket, and -3. Right? And when I print this, I get my I. So that's how we access different characters in a string. And the thing is, it has to always be an integer, which is in a given range, right? So it cannot be larger here. Then how many characters does this string have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, right? So it can't be less than -13, and it can't be larger than 12. Otherwise, let's say I say print string 15. It'll produce an error, right? Because it's out of range, as you see here. Index out of range. So it has to be in the range. And you can see right here, the left-hand side, we've shown how hello has been indexed. So you can use that as a reference when you actually look at the indices of the string. So now we're going to move on to what a string actually is. So it's a immutable data type. That means once we've defined the value, so I've defined over here string is equal to QP. Now once I've defined it, I cannot change the value afterwards, right? So I can't actually edit this value. I mean, I can reassign the variable, but I can't actually edit the value of the string, right? So that's one thing that Python does. That's why it's called immutable.
Right. So even if we like try to edit it, like since you guys probably, if you guys know how lists work, you know, if I would try this exact operation with a list, let's say this. Now in a list, it would just replace it because list is a mutable data type, but this is immutable. As you can see, this is going to cause an error as it does not support assignment in this case. You can reassign it and change the value, but that's not the same thing as changing the string itself. So yeah, let's move on to string operations. So now what are string operations? So as you guys know, strings are nothing but a series of characters and we can perform operations on it. So the first type of operation we have is concatenation. So in concatenation, let's say you have, I'm just gonna actually do initially. Okay, let's say I have a string, I am from, and I have a string, programming. Okay, now I can join these strings together. Again, I'm going back to that. I'm not changing the values of either of the strings. I'm creating a new variable z, which has both the strings together. So z equals x plus y. Now the plus here does not mean the same thing as it means in arithmetic, where you add the two values. In this, you join the two values. So as you can see, if I print z, it says I'm from Q programming because it has joined both the strings together the way I would want it. So in Python, in technical terms, we call this process concatenation.
Yeah, so concatenation is basically just joining two strings. And you have to remember that since a white space is also considered as a Unicode character, you have to be careful about using spacing. Like if you see here in Y, Arjun left a space before Q, so that when it prints them together, that way we have a space, right? So otherwise, if I say X is equal to hello, and Y is equal to world, and I print them. Oh wait, let me print X plus Y. When I print it, it joins hello world together, right? So I'll have to actually add a space before W or a space after O if I want to keep spacing when they're joined together.
Okay. So spacing is important when you're joining two strings and if you want it to print like a sentence. So now let's discuss what repetition is. Just the same way as concatenation, repetition requires something that you probably have heard of in maths or like you've seen in maths. It's multiplication. So if I have x equals to a, and if I say that print, if I like on the shell, if I write x star 4 and I write it directly, it's just going to print the output without me having to use the print command. So now if I do this, it just prints a 4 times. So what's happening here? Basically, as you guys know, even in maths, multiplication is nothing but repeated addition. So imagine this x star 4 being the same as x plus x plus x plus x. Same thing. The only thing is we just did repeated addition, and in maths we call that multiplication. Hence we're using the multiplication operator here, and this is how repetition in strings would actually work, the same way you would expect it to while concatenating many times, not once.
Yeah. And you need to remember, let's say if I say print x times minus 2, then it'll print an empty thing, right? Because we cannot actually do that. It can only be a positive integer, right? So it has to be greater than 0. So if I say x times 2, then it'll print a. So it has to be greater than 0 if you want a repeated thing. And the next thing,
now
membership. So membership basically means whether something is in something, right? Like if you're a member of a club, right? I say I'm a member of this club. So that means I'm inside this club. And if I'm not a member, then I'm not in this club, right? So in Python, we use in and not in, right? So let me just write that here. So we have in and not in as our membership.
This is opposites of each other.
Yeah. So let's say I have a string. String is equal to Q programming, right? String, but whatever. So let's say if I want to check, is this letter in string, right? So is Q in string true, right? Because Q is there. Now if I say Q in false, right? Because this is lowercase q. Remember, Python is a case-sensitive language because it directly uses the ASCII values that each character has. So uppercase q and lowercase q have separate values. So if I say lowercase q is not there, but uppercase q is there, that's what happens here. Now let's say I say q not in, right? It is true, right? Because not in is basically the opposite. Remember, if we did these logical operators not, so not is the reverse, right? So if in is false, then not in is true, right? So since q is not in q programming, lowercase q, that means output's true, right? Because q is not, lowercase q is not in q programming here.
Right. So just the opposite of what n actually does for us. So with that we can actually conclude there's just one more thing we have to do, which is slicing. So now what is slicing? Now as the name suggests, like you would slice a fruit, what do? You cut it into parts. It's the same thing here, you can cut a string into its constituent parts. So I'm just going to clear the shell, I'm going to run it again. So now if I have x equals to my name is Arjun, okay? Now I can slice the strings in many different parts, and I'm sure all of you can by now visualize what I'm talking about. Like I can just take out this part, I can take out this part, I can take out whatever I want, I can take out how many letters I want. So the way to go about it is again using square brackets like we use for finding a character in the string, except here you have to provide two parameters, you can provide a third one if it's zero. Let's start with 2 parameters first. Okay, so let's say I want to find from the 0th index to the 3rd index. Now just the way it works in for loops, it will not consider the last value, it will instead consider everything else before it. So ideally what it will go to index 0, index 1, index 2. So it will print my and a space after. So if I run this, that's exactly what it did. Like you can see this code is up here and there's a space in front. It did not consider the 3rd index because that's how it's programmed.
Yeah.
I can try this with any other index. I can be like -1 to let's say this will return an empty string, and now you guys can tell me why that's happening. Why is this returning an empty string? Because I told it to start from -1 and go to 4. Now here is a very important thing that comes into play called step.
Yeah.
So
step value, so you looked at the range function before, right? In the for loop, and between the for loop, you looked at the range function. So you probably understand what the step value is. If you haven't understood, we'll explain it again, don't worry. So let's see the step value here, x -1, 4. Let's say I want to take every second character, right? So I'll put -2 because we're going from the right end to the left end. So we're doing -2, right? If you're going left to right, we'll do +2. So now I print this, I get this.
it goes backwards.
So it's taken every second character from the right hand side to the left hand side, from n to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 to a, right? So that's exactly what this step value does. So remember this, when you go from left to right, you have a positive step value. When you go from right to left, you have a negative step value.
And if you don't specify the negative step value, the computer by default assumes it to be a positive one. And since we tried that here, it returned an empty string.
Okay, so the default.
Okay, just one. Yeah. So one more thing you can actually do is you can if you don't provide one of these two essential values like over here -1 to 4 or 0 to 3. Now if I don't provide 3, what is it actually? If I just write thing to 3, nothing else, this is gonna give the same thing because the first value is assumed to be 0, but the second value, and I'm just gonna show you guys what it does. 1, 2. I'm just gonna leave it that way. I mean, you can probably guess what it does. It prints everything after the first index till the very last value.
Yeah.
And since I wrote 1, y is the first value.
Exactly. So that was slicing. Slicing is very fun to do. You can get a lot of questions from slicing. So just be careful while you're doing that, and don't forget the empty string case where we went from -1 to 4, because you have to provide a negative step value if you're going from right to left. Don't forget that.
Important to keep this step in mind.
Yeah.
Okay, now our next topic is traversing in a string.
Yeah, so traversing a string. We actually looked at this while doing the for loop, if you remember. We used for through a string. well, we can also use a while loop for traversing a string, but let's just quickly recap what traversing a string through a for loop look like, right? So if I say for character in string, let me just define string first. String is equal to Q programming, right? So for character in string, I want to say print character, right? So now I run this. It shows all the characters of Q programming printed line by line, right? So we saw that what happens, right? The control variable is ch. So every time this loop runs, for every iteration, ch takes the value of the character. So for the first iteration, ch is Q. Second, it's the dash. Then third, it's p. Then r. Then o, etc. Right? So that's what happened in the for loop when you traverse a string.
Right. So I'm just gonna give you guys a little trick question. If I put this, now just watch what happens. It just printed the string. Now, why do you think this happened? I would like you guys to actually pause and think about what my program is doing, but I'm just gonna tell it to you right now. What is doing it? I provided an end value this. So each time a character is being printed, it does not go to the next line, which is the default end value of the string of the print command, right? So first it'll take the value q, then dash. I mean the ch, this control variable, is traversing through the string, but it's just printing it in the same line. So like this is a kind of trick question I thought I should ask, because it does require you to think a little about what all you have learned and why is it printing the same. So now let's try how does this work with the while loop. So traversing with a while loop is very similar with a for loop. In this though, you have to be more specific and you have to give the string index. Okay, so I'm just going to use string only. Now I'm just going to define index as a variable and I'm going to give it an initial value 0. Now while index is less than len of string. Okay, now what is len? It's basically a function of from the length of the string. We're just going to discuss that very shortly. Just hold up for a minute. I say print string index, and now I'm just going to run this. It's going to do what the for loop did before. I put the end command. Sorry, index plus equals to 1. The while loop does not add the value itself, right? So as you guys can see what happened here, it just printed like Q started there because there was no end before, then Q programming all the way.
Right. Oh, I delete the string also.
Yeah. So if we run this, now I know the typing lag, so we just printed a bunch of characters multiple times, and as you can see, regardless, it's printed the string the way we put it. Q programming. Okay. We put a few extra letters in the middle. You can ignore that, but if the whole string was printed properly. And that's what it does for us. I'll just try with the right string over. Yeah, okay. Now here's the exact output you were expecting. Since now what exactly I did over here is I created a new variable index. And I said while index is less than the length of the string will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and just count it. Now while the index 0, whatever index 0 is less than the length of the string, print the string value. Like someone told you how you can actually find a character in the string. That's what I'm doing. I'm printing that value of the index and continuously adding index to one so that it checks the next value and so on and so forth. So that's about how you can use the while loop.
Yeah. Basically accessing each character string, like we discussed in the beginning, accessing characters in a string. This is what you're doing. You're accessing characters in a string in a loop, right? That's exactly what this is. Okay, so now the last topic for today, string methods and built-in functions. So actually Python has given us a lot of many built-in functions to use with strings, right? So a lot of them, there's a whole table given in your NCERT textbook we'll be covering most of them today here. So let's get started with those.
Right. Okay, so I'm just gonna choose a string cube programming, and if I need to change the string, I'll do it accordingly. Okay. So now, like I just discussed what the length function. Now, what the length function does is it just prints the length. So you can count yourself 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13. So 13 is the last character in our string, and that's exactly what it printed. Because it just counts how many characters are there, and remember this includes spaces. Okay. So if I just make a variable which says A, B, C, D. Now the length will not return 4, it will return 5. Okay. So why? Because the space is also considered as the character when it comes to the string. Now the title function. The title function basically just makes every first word a capital letter. So I say I'm just not going to do the grammar properly. And you can see it just grammatically corrects the sentence. Okay. It's now I just say x dot title. Now you can see what it did for me. It made every single first character of every word capital and the rest of them small. So that's what the title function there. I don't think there's anything much to do with it.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah. So a lot of these functions are actually quite self-explanatory. So we saw length, title case, and then lower. What do you think lower will be? It'll obviously be converting everything into lowercase, right? So now we have x stored as this. So let's say x dot lower. Right. Now returns everything in lowercase. Now let's say I want to put everything into uppercase, right? So I go x dot upper. And now returns everything.
The computer will scream at you.
What?
Now the computer will scream at you. All caps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can go back to title case, title, and we're back in title, right? So these are the major sentence reordering ones, right? Now the next one we're going to discuss is count.
Okay. So now what the count function does is it basically counts how many times a substring is present in a string. Now the way the name suggests, substring is a part of the string, it's a subset. So if I have x equals to a, b, c, d, a. Okay. Now I say that x dot count. Now in this is a function where you have to pass parameters. In this function, there was a parameter. In this function, there was no parameter. So you have to be careful with which function requires parameters and which function does not. So this function very much does require parameters. Usually the parameter can be the string itself, but in this case it's not. So now in this case, first you have to provide the string. So you want to basically I want to tell first how many times does the letter A occur. So I do this. Then I give it the value, starting value 0 and ending value -1. So what this will do is it will go from index 0 to -1 and tell me how many times does A occur. And since the last value is not considered, it only checked it once. But I'm just going to redefine it. Just going to make the exact same code. And now in this case, it came to Y because the letter A came twice. And you can do this with a substring of as many characters as you would want. You guys can mess around with it yourself on your own compiler. Okay. Now next we have is find. So the find function will tell the index where that letter exists. Okay. So in this also you have to provide the 3 parameters you were expecting: A, starting value, ending value. Okay. Now it tells A is at the very first value, so it prints 0. And remember, it only will print the first occurrence of the string. Okay? It will not print after that. And you can like change the starting and ending values. You can mess around with that. I would really recommend you all please try this with yourself. Try different strings. Try as many functions as you can. Okay. Now the index function. This is actually a very important function. Say if I'm gonna make this. Okay, so if I say I want to know the index of the letter A, okay, x dot index A. Here also I'm providing a parameter. Now I'll just print the index. So what do? It just checked that 0, 1, 2, and 2 is right here. So since the letter A is a substring of our string, it just printed the index, right? Now these functions you can see actually printed some reasonable values that you could use, but some strings just return boolean values like ends with. So as you guys can probably tell, what does ends with do? It checks whether the string ends with a value. So x dot ends with. First, I'm gonna see if this works with the value actually true. Since it does end with g, does it end with g? Yes, okay. But if I just change this to x, no, false. So you guys can see this is a returning boolean value. Same thing with starts with. I'm just gonna copy paste it and starts with x dot starts with x. So starts with, as you guys can guess, it just does the same thing as ends with. Now I'm just gonna put letter I and true. Okay. So now see, there are many functions, and we are gonna actually wanting you to try it yourself. I'm just now gonna pick up the more important function. Okay. So is alnum, I'm just going to discuss. I don't think we need to write everything. Is alnum will just check if all the characters are either alphabetic or numeric. It's in the name, alnum. So alphabetic or numeric. Is lower tells, since we use the lower function, it just tells whether all the characters are in lowercase or not. Is upper, it's obviously going to tell if all the characters are in upper space or not. Is space. So it will return true if the string is not empty. Now I'll just say now obviously this will not need a parameter, but now if I just put spaces in the string, nothing else, it returns true. Similarly, is title is basically just checking if it matches with the parameters of the way a title function works. So since x does not, I'm just going to do is title and false, right? I don't think I need to explain this any further. I'm sure you guys are actually understanding this because it's very direct. It's in the name of the function. Python has made all of these functions. Now we have else strip and r strip. So if I have extra space before a string, and if I say a dot else strip, that means strip it from the left. So it'll just remove all the extra space from the left. So if I have extra space in the right, I can do e dot r strip. Like the name is pretty evident of what it's doing. And if I have spaces on both sides, I can just use strip directly. Like it'll just remove all the space from either side. Okay. Now replacing. Replacing is actually a very important function. Now, as I told you guys, you cannot replace a character, like you can't change the value of the string, but replacing changes the value of the variable that contains the string. So I'm just going to consider x, which we have defined up here. I'm going to say x dot replace in with I. Okay. And now it's just going to print I am at cupogram. Now, as you can see, now why did this happen? Because at the end of the string, we have cupogram in, and I and n are there together. So this will check for all the occurrences of this very substring and it'll replace them accordingly. Like I can just do x dot replace. I don't necessarily have to use words here. I can use whatever I want. Use special characters for that matter. Right, you can see what that did. It just replaced all occurrence of small I with star. Now let's talk about joining. So in joining, you can just separate each and every character with anything you want. So I can say x dot join, and I just need to give any string. I can just be like star. Now between every two characters, this star is going to come. Okay, sorry, I'm doing it wrong. You have to do it this way. To join. So this is gonna now between every single character is gonna put a star, as you guys can see. I'm just ignore that. Now between every single character there's a star, because now this value that I've given you before the point, it is going to come between each and every character of the string that I've given in the parameter. Now similarly, there's a function called partition, which will just separate each and every word into like different strings. Okay. So if I say x dot partition, now I can provide where I want the partition to happen. So I can say I am in Kipurang, right? So I want the partition to be around the word in. I can just do that, and as you can see, before in I had I am, so it came alag se. In is just the way it is, and Q programming came like that. Okay. Now split function will just split all of them in different characters, and this obviously, as you can tell, we don't have to provide any parameters. You can just do this. Okay. So I have covered most of the important functions, and most of these I feel are very direct. You guys should just go through it once. The name actually just gives it away what the function does. So that's it from the functions.
They're quite easy. And you don't even have to remember most of them, since if you know what they do, you can probably just find them out easily. So no need to actually remember them. Now there's one more section in the NCRT called handling strings. We won't be covering that actually because it's quite logical, and it is just defining functions to operate on strings. So if you've learned all these things you can do with strings, you can easily create functions to actually use with strings, right? So I don't think we need to really cover that. But besides that, we are going to be...
We haven't done functions yet. So
function
once we do functions, we'll come to this.
Yeah, function was before this chapter. So we're going to be putting tutorials on our site though, so we probably will be covering using functions with strings, so don't worry about that. But for this video, we won't be doing that, and that's the end of this video. So we hope you like this video. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video, and do check out our website. We'll be putting everything in the description, all the notes and tutorials, and the entire CBSE course we're working on right now. So thank you for watching.
Thank you for watching.
For now.
Thank you. Like, share, subscribe. Bye.